On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 2008. We're going to be taking a look at Jakob Dylan, and he's going to be performing Something Good, This Way Comes. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So let's get Jakob up on screen and see how he gets on. Jakob Dylan.
Got my window open wide. I've got my window open wide. I've got a good woman by my side. I've got a good woman by my side. Oh, this kind of day has no night. Yeah, this kind of day has no night. And I ain't got much on my mind. No, I ain't got much on my mind. Now I know something good this way comes. I'm watching the streets filling up. I'm watching the streets filling up. In the shade of the summer sun. In the shade of the summer sun. Got sweet apple pie on the stove. Got sweet apple pie on the stove. The birds, they're all flying low. The birds, they're all flying low. They know something good this way comes. Yes, something good this way comes. The troubled dog is not a moving mouse, but digging the ground that you're on. And if it's true that good fortune gives no chase, we've got just what it takes. Call her up on my coat. Yeah, call her up on my coat. My trucks are pulled in for the show. My trucks are pulled in for the show. A grasshopper jumping the road. A grasshopper jumping the road. The kids, they're all running home. The kids, they're all running home. They know something good this way comes.
I'm just going to jump in here. As always, the link to this video is going to be in the description below, so you guys can check it out there without me interrupting it. But Jakob Dylan here, without a band, obviously, just himself and a guitar, is something that when you have a father as famous and as successful as Bob Dylan, you're always going to get compared to him. I think that's something that's inevitable. And it's great here that Jakob, when he did first start out, went down the band route and didn't go straight into the singer-songwriter folk. Actually, he was inspired mostly by punk music, and that was listening to the Buzzcocks and so many other bands. The Clash especially got him into learning to play the guitar, learning to get into a band and the whole band craft, rather than just being a solo artist and just accompanying yourself. Jakob has that husky quality to his voice, and it is something that you might attribute as rasp when you hear singers pushing their chest voice and adding that element to their vocal sound. But with Jakob, he's singing in a comfortable range here, keeping it in that conversational space. And because of that, the composition and the performance isn't going to seem dramatic. It's not going to have a real impact because of the fact we're staying within the same range. When you're listening to a song that might start in a lower octave for the verse and then for the chorus flips up a whole octave, that is going to be really dramatic because of the range that you cover. and especially if the tempo is pushed a little bit as well. So we have the opposite here, just staying in the same place, and musically, this is the difference between artists and compositions. Sometimes you want to stay in the same range because you're not going for impact. You're not trying to take people on a journey that's like a roller coaster, and generally when you cover a wide range and up the tempo, it's going to seem more like a musical roller coaster than something that is just drifting along. I do want to get into the guitar because Jakob's throwing a few fills in here, keeping it interesting. Also a little bit of hammer-on action, and we have a D7th in there, also an E7 sus4 to keep it interesting. So when we're getting into this, we're going to be starting on the C, and we're going to be moving over to the F, and back to the C, and we have this run. It's really subtle, but it's definitely in there, like that. And just for reference, I'm capoed on the 4th fret here, standard tuning if you want to play along. So what's happening with the C shape, rather than just playing straight chords like that, we've got this little hammer on of the 2nd finger, and you're going to play your normal C shape, but then take off your 2nd finger and hammer it on after you've struck those strings. Like that. And we've got a similar thing on the F. As you can see, when Jakob transitions to that F chord, he's now, I mean, technically this is going to be an F major 7th unless you mute that high E string like that, otherwise you'll get that major 7th sound. And by the sounds of it here, Jakob is muting because we just hear the F and the hammer-on of that 2nd finger with that F shape. So with the C, start without that 2nd finger and then bring the little finger on to where it would be for the F, take off your 2nd finger. This is exactly what Jakob does. And then hammers on that 2nd finger to complete that F shape. So when we include the really subtle run that's in there, we've got the C, F, C, run, and same thing again. As you can see there, when I went to the C, we're getting into that shape without the 2nd finger after the run. So we're going, and now the 2nd finger isn't on yet because we're hammering it on to complete the chord in exactly the same way that we do when we go over to the F, but now hammering on to that G string, 2nd fret. Just like that. So once you've been through that, we've got a D minor, C, G, and that 2nd time you could see, I think Jakob just leaves that C again to hammer on with the 2nd finger, even in this section from the D minor. Just like that. Because this chord progression does turn around pretty quickly, we've got another section thrown in there, and this is where we have this E7 sus4 that we're starting with. Just down to the E7th, and then we've got the A minor to a G to a C to a D7th to a G, like that. Let me just take you through that final fill that Jakob throws in on the G. It is really subtle, you'll have to listen out for it, but it's definitely in there. We've got this G, and then we're coming on with that 1st finger, and then putting on that little finger on the 3rd fret, and we get that sound. Like that. Like I said, it's really subtle. The other thing is that if you're not muting that high E string, it's going to sound bad. So you might want to get a little bit of the fleshy part of your hand on that high E string, or just be really strict with the right hand and make sure you don't hit that high E string. And you can just mess around with it, find that right position. you'll start to find where you can mute that high E string with a part of your hand. In order to get that fill to pop out. Another thing to point out is the way that Jakob throws in a little bit of double time strumming very quickly between chord changes, and this is something that's going to make it sound a little bit more exciting rather than just playing your chords straight. So if I was playing them straight and I went that's fine, but what Jakob's doing is going like that, a really subtle difference. And this is something that you can put between all of your chords if you want to make it a little bit more exciting. So the D minor, like that. So muting the chord in order to make it a little bit clearer for you guys to understand it, we've got this. It's just that double time, down, up, down, in order to get that extra sound to it and drive it along a little bit more from a rhythm perspective. But let's watch the performance to the end, and we will get into some of Jakob's history and career at the end of the video as well.
Yes, something good this way comes. The troubled dog is not now moving mouse, but digging the ground that you're on. If it's true that good fortune gives no change, we've got just what it takes. I've got my window open wide. I've got my window open wide. I've got a good woman by my side. I've got a good woman by my side. And I know something good this way comes. Yes, something good this way comes. Now something good this way comes.
And there we have it. Another thing to point out about Jakob is the way that he is obviously throughout his career focused on songwriting. And this is something that obviously would have been an influence from his father, but having this dedication and focus on songwriting, I always say, is the most difficult thing about the whole music industry and being a musician, is writing a song that people can connect with and being able to write songs for other artists as well that are successful. It's always interesting to see different artists and musicians and where they place their focus, whether it is being a great songwriter, a great performer in general, or a great singer, a great guitarist, for example. There have been millions of great guitar players who have mastered the fretboard, but then when it comes to writing a song, it's a totally different animal. You have to practice writing songs and getting better at writing, and then even still, it's not an exact science. It is so difficult to write a hit and something that connects with people on a deep level. But that has obviously been the focus of Jakob throughout his career. When you look at the songs written on the albums that he has composed, they are pretty much all just Jakob getting the songs down. But getting into Jakob's history, of course, he is the son of Bob Dylan, and those bands that he got inspired by when he was young, the Buzzcocks, the Clash, also the Jam were in there. He played in various bands when he was at school, and when he did leave school, he went to study art, but then he quit that course in order to pursue a career in music. He and his childhood friend, Toby Miller, formed a band called the Wallflowers, and they would get out there in Los Angeles, just playing the clubs, gigged as much as possible, and this would eventually lead them to sign with Virgin Records, and their first album was released in 1992, and that was just a self-titled album. album, and it would have been when Jakob was 23 years of age. So they toured and played as many gigs as possible, and unfortunately in 1993 the management team at Virgin Records changed, and they didn't get on with the band, and they weren't happy with the sales figures. Also, the band didn't get on with them. So they asked if they could leave the label, which Virgin Records agreed to. So they were now without a label, but they still stuck at it and played gigs in and around LA, to the point where they did get spotted and signed by Interscope Records. Toby Miller left the band before the release of the new album, which meant that Jakob wrote that album himself, and in 1996, when it was released, it was called Bringing Down the Horse, and it went 4 times platinum, which led to Jakob and the guys supporting Sheryl Crow, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, his dad Bob Dylan, and also the Rolling Stones. There were quite a few personnel changes in the band, but it was always centered around Jakob, and in the year 2000 they released Breach, in 2002 was Red Letter Days, and in 2005 was Rebel Sweetheart. And in 2006 is when Jakob broke away and started performing by himself as a solo artist, and this led to him signing a record contract with Columbia Records. In 2007 he appeared on several tribute albums, and in 2008 was his first solo release, and that was called Seeing Things, and that was a massively popular album. It got to number 24 in the charts in the USA, and it got to number 8 of the rock charts. He also made television appearances and was on tour a lot with his backing band, and they were called the Gold Mountain Rebels. He released his second solo album in 2009, and that was called Women and Country, and that was even more popular than his solo debut, because this album got to number 12 in the charts and number 2 in the rock charts, so just missing out on that number 1 spot. He continued to tour and appear on TV, and this time the band backing him were called Three Legs. In 2012, the Wallflowers returned with the release of an album, Glad All Over, and in 2013 they embarked on an arena tour opening for Eric Clapton. In 2019, Jakob was involved on an album called Echo in the Canyon, and that was covers in the form of duets that he would sing, and they were Southern California folk rock songs from the 1960s era, and he did actually make an extended documentary about that whole album and process. But it's great to have a look back at Jakob doing his own thing here in a soloist setup, just him and a guitar, and hopefully, fingers crossed, this won't get blocked. Sometimes the Jules Holland show is very strict with copyrights and blocking videos, but we'll see how we get on. Thank you guys for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!